G'day everyone, I'm here with Matt Crundall. Matt Crundall is the head coach of the Crundall crew, who are competing at the upcoming TSF Team Champs. Matt, how are you going?
Hey JP, doing really well. Happy New Year.
Yes, happy New Year's to you too. I hope you had a good break. I know you went away on holiday over the last couple of weeks, but clearly, obviously, still prepping because Team Champs is less than 2 months away. I'm excited to have you on board today to talk to you in the preparation, find out a little bit more about who you are, and give everybody the opportunity to learn a bit more about who you are, who your coaching brand is, who your lifters are, and yeah, just preview what's going to be obviously a really awesome day.
Thanks for having me.
Now, first off, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit for those that might not be familiar with who you are and your background as a coach and as an athlete?
My name's Matt Crundall. I've been lifting in general since 2015. I started just general bodybuilding training at a commercial gym for a couple of years. And then in 2017, I started powerlifting. I found out that you could actually lift as a sport. Um, so I actually started at Melbourne Uni Powerlifting Club, coached by Robert Wilkes. Stayed there for 1 year and left. I just didn't feel it was adequate, basically. Then from
How old were
2018
you at that point?
onwards, I've just been self-coached. Oh yeah, so in 2017 I was 17, turning 18, so I started powerlifting as a sub-junior, and then after that year I was just self-coached and found Training Day Gym, which is the gym I train at and also personal train out of. My coaching has also started in 2018. It started quite small with just one or two clients who were friends. I was trying to get established as a personal trainer in that year. When personal training started to rise, so did my online coaching. And then COVID hit. My personal training took a hit, quite obviously, but somehow my online coaching started to sort of keep trickling through. When lockdowns finished and I was able to come back into the gym, uh, the floodgates kept opening for online coaching as my athletes and I were having good success over this time. So much to the point where I actually started to trim down the amount of personal training I do. I still do it, but to a small amount. And now, largely, what I do is online coaching, but I do train out of the gym where most of my athletes actually also train. So I kind of informally oversee a lot of the people I coach. And yeah, it's just been smooth running since then, since after lockdown, pretty much.
Man, that's such a good story because you obviously started lifting at such a young age, like yeah, 16, 17 years old, whatever. Like lifting seriously. I mean, like a lot of us started young, but to start taking it seriously, doing meets, training, following a program, all that kind of stuff, and then to kind of progress to where you are now, man, it's like actually a tribute to you because a testament to you, sorry, because so many, yeah, personal trainers, so many trainers, coaches, whatever you want to call it, find it hard to find their footing. What do you think's been like the key to your success? Because yeah, even 3 or 4 years ago, you were like pretty, 3, 4 years ago, I would say pretty small time kind of personal trainer coach. Now you're really well established. You've got a really good reputation. You coach a lot of good lifters, and you're very well respected amongst the powerlifting world. What do you think you've attributed that to? Like, what skyrocketed you to where you are now?
Oh, first of all, I appreciate that a lot. So, especially coming from you, because what I was going to say is when I first started in powerlifting, there weren't many gyms or coaches in general. And someone like yourself, in 2017, I believe, starting and then operating TSF to become one of the main pillar powerlifting gyms was pretty cool and inspiring because I think there were only three others maybe in the whole of Victoria. And just seeing that if you're passionate enough about this, you can progress and make your passion a livelihood. That was cool to see you, but also other people start to do it. I feel like I got into powerlifting coaching in the era where coaching started to become a thing. So I guess I was fortunate in that kind of striking into the market early. But obviously, there's a lot of people who can do or start something and then fall off. I think, fortunately for me, I had the drive and passion of actually just loving it genuinely and loving the process of coaching people and making people better so much to the point that it didn't really phase me ever, um, how small or how slow the progression was into the field of coaching. I just loved it and loved my own lifting, and I thought stopping was actually never really an option. So I think it was inevitable that if I loved it enough and had good enough quality coaching and training for myself and other people, that it would grow to this. So yeah, I think just loving genuinely what I do and not stopping as an option. Those two
Thank
things
you.
combined.
No, that's a great answer. First of all, obviously, thanks. The thanks is reciprocated for your kind words. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head, or at least, obviously, it's your own experience. But I just think that's a common thing that I see a lot. Is a lot of good coaches out there not never, but like there isn't really a day you choose to be like, okay, I'm going to make this my full time. Like, of course, that does kind of come eventually at some point, but it's more just like you just love helping people. People can see that energy, they vibe off you, they see you at meets, they inquire with you. All of a sudden, you got this whole thing, and you're like, fuck, I'm coaching like a dozen people now. Like, that's like actually decent roster. You're making a little bit of money, and you're like, oh, like that's kind of when you realize, what's going on. You don't just wake up one day with 0 clients and say like, I'm going to be a coach. You just start helping people because you're interested and you're passionate about it, and you find it fun. And then all of a sudden, you kind of land in this position where you're like, oh, you've actually got a full roster. So no, that's really cool, and I can see that kind of work ethic from you, and like I said, people can kind of see that from you, which is why Crundall Crew has grown to where it is. Speaking of which, we're obviously here to talk about the team champs. We're 2 months away, and it's going to be really exciting. I want you to first off introduce who you've got competing for the Crundall Crew at the Team Champs 2024.
So just a raw introduction from the lightest weight class upwards. In the 67.5 kilo women's class, I've got Jess Lam. In the 75 kilo men's class, I've got Brian Ong. And the 110 kilo men's class, I've got Angus Williams. Whoops, I did the wrong order. And in the 100 kilo class, I've got myself. Yeah.
Best for last. Excellent. And so, you've got a pretty strong lineup there. Like some of those names are quite familiar to me, and I've competed at outcomes before and are quite successful. There's obviously been a few changes compared to your team last year, which we'll go into in a minute. Actually, let's jump into that now. What are the differences between your crew this year, your team this year, and the team that you had last year?
The main differences are so far, starting at the lowest weight class, is instead of Jess Lam, I had Avon Pham last year, who is a 66/67.5 kilo lifter so far, as he's done both APU and USAPL. The reason I would have liked to put him in, however, the reason I've put Jess in instead is Avon at the moment, or actually, he's pursuing wanting to go down the IPF route, but he's also going to be on holidays anyway, so that makes him basically ineligible, like not free to compete. Jess Lam is a very quickly progressing lifter. Her first comp was actually only halfway through last year. She totaled 360 at TSF, and then funnily enough, again at TSF at the end of the year, she totaled 397.5. Her rate of progress is pretty good. The only thing that needs to kind of catch up is just competition experience and being able to execute on the day. Her last comp in December, she totaled 397.5, but in the block post that competition, she's already hit 410 in the gym.
Wow.
And is just continuing to progress quite well. And I think there's a few kilos to be added across each lift. And then perhaps like sprinkle a few kilos more when the competition finally rolls around. So somewhere in the ballpark of, if you do the math, maybe like 415 to 420 something on the day, I think is quite reasonable. And I think that against the girls, which I've scouted at Duina, Abby, and a girl called Lota, that could stack up very well, especially because we'll be in the primetime session, so we might get the advantage over a couple girls, as well as Alyssa Britton, I think her name is. So yeah, being able to play the cards right, plus having the raw strength, and then hopefully a bit more execution ability. It should be tight, but it could be very fruitful. Brian Ong is the 75 kilo re-entry. Last year he was able to win, and last year he also became the national champion, the Open national champion. His total is 675.5 at Nationals. That was off a 6 for 9 day though. Since then, there's a couple to just be blunt. He missed his benches on the day. He was slipping quite a lot with his feet, and we tried to do a crazy sumo pull that probably wasn't there on the day. So there were maybe 10 to 15 kilos salvageable on the day had we played it differently. I think he's probably going to win unless I think Chris Yip, if he decides to join, but I'm not sure if that's going to happen. I still think Brian could win if Chris did join. I think Brian could probably go above 705 kilos and perhaps even get the best lifter on the day. Actually, if he's the only 75 kilo lifter, if that roster stays current, then I think he actually might win best lifter on the day. Last year I had Kevin Ho in the 90 kilo class. It's just simply put, he's not coaching with me anymore, so not putting him in. Instead of putting myself, I'm in the 100 kilo class. My training's going very well. I've just recently hit 757.5 in the gym. Best comp total in April last year was 727.5. I feel I've gone to a point where I can execute quite well on a comp day. The only thing that has happened the last few comps is missing my last dead. I think this was honestly down to just not training on the appropriate equipment. My sounds really picky and finicky, but my Rogue Ohio Power Bar deadlift is quite different to when I pull an Alico, and I've just made it my mission ever since my last comp to exclusively just pull on an Alico bar, which did take a few blocks to actually get up to my peak strength to match the Rogue, but now has exceeded it. And I feel as long as I can just stay healthy and keep things in check with training, I hit the standard in training quite well for all three lifts now, and should be able to piece it together something quite competitive on the day. And then lastly, Gus 110 kilo class last year at Team Champs with a 702.5 kilo total. The main thing that inhibited Gus before then and at that comp was he actually had a large bony lump on his humerus that was occluding a lot of blood and nerve supply and just general movement when he would bench press. And since having that shaved down via surgery and stuff, he's actually put like 30 to 40 kilos on his bench quite rapidly. His squat has continued to progress really rapidly. His deadlift has continued to progress really rapidly. He's already hit like over 50 kilos more than his last 110 total in the gym. And he's still, like Jess, progressing quite fast. So I think it's going to be a huge showdown. Obviously, there's Hung and Remy. That's the big guys in the 110s. But I think Gus will be able to do something quite nuts on the day.
Man, that is a very, very thorough rundown, obviously, but also a very, very strong team that you've got there. Yeah, I'm looking forward to kind of probing a little bit more and finding out a little bit more about how you see some of those sessions going. You kind of alluded to that a little bit already, with Jess in a very tight field and Gus in a very strong 110 field. The 110 field not being the deepest field, if I remember correctly, but very high standard. The first thing I want to ask you though is, I asked this of Alex Delaportis of 3PP about putting yourself into the team. How do you see that faring compared to your experience last year? Obviously, last year you were able to just like fully coach and kind of take control out there. This year you're going to have to do a bit of both roles, competing and coaching at the same time, coaching in the morning and then having to lift in the afternoon, most likely. How do you kind of see that playing out? Obviously, there's pros and cons to that. How do you kind of see that?
So there are more cons for sure than pros because it's just a whole lot harder on the day. There's nothing to really gain except for having myself in a position that is potentially favorable versus any other of my clients that I might have put in. The way I'm planning to manage it is I'm over 100 kilos at the moment, but I'm in striking distance to make 100 kilos by a simple gut cut and maybe some spitting. So my plan is to have a co-handler, like an assistant in the warm-up room, pretty much do all the hard yards for me while I'm doing the strategic game day coaching plus attempt selection and just general warm-up guides. So basically aim to expend as little energy as possible, weigh in swiftly, whilst probably spitting during my handling of the first session, make weight, and then chow down food and liquids while that first session is still going. I've got eating and drinking post-weigh-in down to like just as simple as brushing my teeth. It's I can force it down, no problem, in pretty much any circumstance. I wouldn't put this onus on anyone else I coach, mainly because it's extremely unpleasant, but also very hard to do unless you've done it lots and lots and lots of times. So I think because my cut isn't going to be crazy and I'm very good at refeeding, I think it will be okay and manageable. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, you're going to have to obviously have a good handler there on the day. I actually, one thing I foresee that I've only thought of now as you're talking is unlike, say, Alex Delaportis, who's competing in lifting, Alex will be in the morning session because he's a lightweight and the heavyweights are in the afternoon. So you'll be having to do your weigh-ins while lifting is taking place for the lightweight girls. So depending on how the class is split, we haven't got to that yet. But let's say, for example, Jess Lam's competing in the morning session, and she might be doing deadlifts around the time that you need to be weighing in. So that's going to be quite tricky, challenging for you and your team to be like all over that. Because, you know, if you're anything like me,
yes,
I find it hard to give up power to people. So to know that someone else is doing the attempt selections, and I know you're a good game day strategist, so to not be able to be there potentially, depending on how the timing works, might be a little bit stressful.
Mm. Yes, it will be stressful. And just so I ensure I don't even break any rules, I probably won't hand over the actual attempt selection anyway, because I don't think I'm allowed to. But the only way I see myself weighing in properly is if she happens to have just done her attempt and then they just call me up for weigh-in, and I hand in the new attempt and time it perfectly, or I just wait for everyone to weigh in and then sort of just go in when I'm ready, but very shortly after everyone has weighed in, so I don't have to cram the weigh in. But yeah, that is a good factor. However, I think if I can push the timing such that I can weigh in, worst case, right after everyone has weighed in at my own leisure, it should be okay and enough time.
Yes, it sounds like that's another vote for keeping the weight cut small. You know,
In theory.
if the cut's big and you have to weigh in late, that's never fun. But if the weight cut's a bit smaller, then it's a little bit more manageable. Speaking about Jess, I wanted to ask you about how you foresee that class going. You kind of talked about, you know, 410 to 420 kind of total. That's a huge total at 67.5. But I know those girls, like you mentioned, Abby, Edwina, they're also, you know, 400 kilo plus totalers. Like, and unlike Jess, they've done it before, you know. So it's not like it's uncharted territory for Jess. You know, like, okay, you said she's done 410 in the gym, but this is kind of uncharted territory. She's still getting used to these weights. Whereas for these girls, they've proven time and time again they can go 400 plus. Yeah, what's your predictions, or what do you see kind of like taking place in the 67 class? Because that's one of my favorite classes. I'm super excited to see how that goes down.
Yeah, I'm excited too. So the way it's laid out in terms of her main competitors, I believe it's Abby Stronall from Melbourne Strength Culture, Edwina from 3 Points or TSF,
3PP.
Lota from and Lota from Apex, Alyssa Britton from Stronghold in Ballarat. So two of them are going to be in the prior session during the Saturday, and then two of them are going to be in the primetime session. So
no, I think it's only just one. I think it might just be the Stronghold girl. I think
Stronghold, and then did 3PP
3PP don't go too.
Place top 10?
They're in top 2, yeah.
Sweet.
They're in
okay, sweet. So yeah, the main thing is I think Alyssa is actually going to be probably top 3 based off what I've seen from her open powerlifting, but also just snippets of training and stuff. So it's just basically seeing what we need to hit to get above that. Obviously, the main challenge comes when we have to verse the other 3 girls on the Sunday. Again, you said it's going to be really tough. It is going to be really tough for Jess to come in like top 2 or 3. The only thing is really just executing, making lifts, and just making smart attempt selection, not being too greedy, and trying to jump in when other people might overexert themselves and miss lifts. Again, you've already said that these girls can make lifts and they can execute. It is based off really just how good she can execute on the day and kind of jumping into small gaps that people might leave as the attempts go on throughout the day. So yeah, it is going to be really tough, but we'll just do our best to get into the top three, which I think if we play our cards right and just stay on the ball the whole day, it is possible.
Yeah, it's funny because you talk about making lifts and taking the opportunities when they arise. It kind of reminds me of two things. One is that, one thing I often say as a coach and as a game day coach and to people that I mentor and kind of help out and teach is, especially on game day, what matters most is making lifts. Nothing matters more than making lifts because, especially for girls of that strength, if you miss one squat, you lose 7.5 kilos. And that 7.5 kilos, if you finish on 405 instead of 412, that could be the difference between finishing third and finishing first, or finishing fourth and finishing first.
Yes.
Or if you miss one deadlift, again, you miss 7.5 or 10 kilos, and it'll be the girl that ends up making more lifts, ends up winning. And there's a reason why 8 out of 9 days, 9 out of 9 days win. The second thing is that it reminds me a little bit of last year's team champs. I don't know if you remember very well in the 90 kilo class. Cam Brown of, I think it was going to be Melbourne Strength Culture, was kind of heavy favorite in the 90 kilo class and ended up finishing, I think, third. He went 6 out of 9. He missed a third squat, he missed a third bench, he missed a third deadlift, and he ended up finishing in third place. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I don't remember where he finished. I think it was, second or third. I do remember that guy's Suleiman won. Mm-hmm. But I also thought Cam was going to win as well. So, yeah, that was interesting.
And I mean, it goes back to what we love about sports, right? Is that it is unpredictable. Because if it was perfectly predictable, then what's the point of even doing the day? But you never know. Maybe Edwina has a bad day and goes 6 out of 9 and ends up finishing fourth, or maybe she has a 9 out of 9 day. Abby's the one who has the 7 out of 9 day, and it's the other way around. And those are just impossible to predict. Even Jess Lam could have a great day, could have a poor day. Mm-hmm. You mentioned Brian Ong at Nationals last year, and he went 6 out of 9. So even good lifters like Brian, it can happen. You can have quote unquote bad days, and so anything can happen on the day. I wanted to ask you actually. You also talked about scouting out some lifters, checking out open powerlifting, and this is a conversation I had with Michael. That video just went up yesterday. By the time this comes out, maybe a week ago. If you haven't seen that video, go check it out. It was a great conversation I had with Michael from Elemental. But I want to ask you about the importance of being prepared as a coach, and not just being prepared in terms of knowing your lifters, but in terms of knowing the field, knowing where to put your eyes. Because, for me as a coach, on the day, things go so quick. I say like if you're figuring shit out on the day, it's too late. And so I'm a really big proponent of mapping out ahead of time. But it sounds like you've done a bit of research. How important would you say that is?
Quite important. Until the day kind of starts flowing, and then you can actually see the attempts and see what people have left in the tank as the attempts are running. The main importance, I feel, is just knowing the general stack up and hierarchy of where people are going to place, and also what the size of the attempts and the jumps might be for each person and what their coach typically does for them in terms of just generally predicting what might come next. But I feel it is important just having a grasp of what they might typically do in a comp, what lifts they might miss, what attempt jumps they might have, and their weaknesses and strengths. And if you can even scout further beyond open powerlifting, like if you see their meet recaps or their coaches' meet recaps, the comments they might make, the things they might struggle with on the day, like all the minutiae, can definitely add up in terms of just navigating the day and predicting what may or may not happen for them that's outside of just hitting the lifts. It's very important. So yeah, I think it is very important to scout and do your due diligence, coach.
Yeah, I think of course you can only start looking at those things once a day rolls around. I also think that knowing where to look, you need to know who you're looking out for, what their projected numbers going to look like. Let's say, for example, someone, using the girls as an example again, let's say one of the girls that you're competing against has a 412.5 total, and on the day she did 412.5, she scored a 160. Today she scored a 165. To me, that's a big flag, a big, not red flag, but I suppose a big sign of okay, well, she's ahead of pace already. And if her squat's up, that probably means her deadlift's going to be up, or her bench, she's obviously gotten stronger. So that's a big kind of okay, keep my eyes open. Whereas if her best total is 410 and she did 160 that day, but today she only got 150, you can almost not write them off, but you can almost say, okay, cool, they're already behind pace. We can, no matter what happens with bench and deadlifts, they've already lost 10 kilos relative to their best total. So I think like that can kind of, what's what I'm looking for here? Not fast track, but that can kind of like save you time thinking later of having to do the maths. It's like you already know where they're at and what they're doing.
For sure.
Now, you
100%.
mentioned the 75 kilo class. Brian Ong, I would say, is obviously a clear favorite to take out that class. The other two lifters are lifting on the day one, so we're not going to go too much into detail there. I think the USAPL rankings came out last week, and I think Brian was like top 4 or whatever in the nation. So we know he's a very talented lifter, and I think the
Top
important thing
6
that
at the moment,
yeah, sorry. And the one thing I want to maybe comment on is, and I said this in previous conversations with other coaches, is that there's going to be a lot of ties. There's going to be a lot of ties on terms of score. And if it comes down to dots, even though Brian, let's say, wins his weight class, I think, if he scores 480 dots versus 500 dots, for example, that, like, let's say he goes 6 out of 9 and only gets 480 versus a 9 out of 9 day, he gets 500. That extra 20 dots, that drags up the team's average. That could be the difference again between finishing, say, 5th in the team result and 4th, or finishing 3rd in the team result and 2nd. And so there is actually still a bit riding on there. Yeah. It's not just a case of like, okay, he's going to win and he can just walk over. He's actually going to have to put in some effort and do the best he can anyway.
100%, yeah. That's a huge important factor given how competitive this pool is.
Yeah, and I think that's one of my goals actually, is that everything should matter. Like, I don't want there to be a situation, well, not that I don't want there to be a situation, but it's like my goal is to make every lift matter. Like whether you're coming, like, and I said this in a previous interview as well, but if a lifter comes 7th or finishes 5th, normally that doesn't matter. But at this comp, it does, because if you finish 7th, you only get 1 point. If you finish 5th, you get 2. And so there is something to fight for. Like, no matter how good you are, even if you think, oh, okay, I'm not a very good lifter, you've still got something to fight for. Anyway, moving on. I want to talk a little bit about, let's go to the 110 kilo class. Let's go out of order. You said Gus, he's got a big, strong field against him with Hung and Remy. How do you kind of see that shaping up? And
Yes.
I mean, there's not a lot to say really. Like, Hung is a fucking monster. Remy looks like he's improving crazy. What's your predictions there?
So this kind of ties into the 100 kilo class as well, and I'm not sure if anyone actually saw it, but I saw Tony Nguyen's name on the upcoming Apex comp list, even though he's already signed up for team champs in the 100 kilo class. And that just made me think that perhaps Hung might, because he actually weighs around 99 kilos apparently, might do the 100 kilo class to push some big name teams further down the list, keep his gold, but reduce the amount of points that the other teams will get. That's just a theory, so that's just one element of it. If that happened, I think Gus would either come 1st or 2nd, depending how Remy goes in the day one. Remy's very strong as well, and Remy would probably need to have an average day, and Gus would need to capitalize on that. If Hung stayed in the 110 kilo class, I foresee the same thing happening, but just one place down. So Gus taking 2nd or 3rd, which is still a placing that is satisfactory for how competitive and how many other teams are going to be in there. So yeah.
For sure, dude. I think that is amazing scouting and preparation to have noticed that. If Hung was to go to 100, what do you think happens to Tony? Do you think Tony gets subs out for someone else, or do you think he goes to 110 class? What's the changes that you foresee Elemental making?
So if that hypothetical situation actually unfolds, I see them just picking someone else. There's a strong girl called Catherine Chakra. Her name I don't think was actually on the current roster. They could put her in, and if they put her in, it'll be very tight in her weight class. If Hung does go to the hundreds, I foresee the ranking, which I guess will tie into the hundreds, being Hung at the top, and then the rest will follow down.
Yeah, that's freaking crazy scouting. Like I said, I didn't notice that, and yeah, that's actually a really good
didn't
point.
Notice that until it was actually accidental. I found that out, but yeah.
I would have taken the claim anyway, because you're right. That 100 class is very competitive, and if Hunk goes into that 100 and pushes everyone down a point, that could be make or break. How do you see the 100 class going out? It's a really strong field. I'm looking at names like obviously yourself, Tyson Andrews, who's going to be on day one, but he's an absolute monster. Timothy Wang lifted really well last year, and I know he's going to have improved. Let's assume Tony Nguyen's in there for now. Tom Glover is a freaking monster too. Like, that's a deep field, but it's also a talented field. Like, who do you kind of think is the one to watch there, and who's going to win that 100 class?
So, off the current people in the class, if we're just going off that, and I'm only talking about the top three, I think my prediction would be Tyson at the top.
Wow.
Followed by, Tyson at the top, followed by Tim or Tony, and potentially myself, depending on how things keep going. Let's just say I'm taking myself out of the equation. I'm just looking at the competitors. I think it would be Tyson and then Tim or Tony, very, very close, because if you remember last year, that was extremely close too. So Tyson does tend to not reveal much about his training until either close to the comp or when the comp has already finished. Based on his training and the kind of jumps he can make from comp to comp, he's a very serious competitor because he's able to consistently progress quite well from comp to comp despite being an advanced lifter already. I think he'd honestly be his best total at ESS in July, which I was actually at, was 767.5, and then he totaled a few kilos less at Nationals. I think if he's able to make a nice jump and his training goes very well, he'll be able to total perhaps in the 780 ballpark.
Wow.
The thing is, he doesn't have that prime time advantage, so that's kind of what a lot of the 100 kilo guys will be working with. Tim, I actually train alongside him sometimes. He goes to training day. I see him here and there. His training can be quite good, but I know that he's prone to just niggles, injuries, and things of that nature derailing how his momentum goes. However, if he does build up quite a lot of momentum and he goes into his peak basically injury-free and healthy, I think it's hard to predict because his comp performance has kind of gone up and down since teams last year. But if I give him the benefit of the doubt and everything goes very well, I think he'd be in the ballpark of 760 plus, which is also huge. And having the primetime advantage over Tyson is very huge too. For Tony, I think every comp he's done, and not just to like pump him up or anything, but I think honestly, every comp he's done, he's had a lot more in the tank across the board. Last comp at teams, I believe, I can't remember off the top of my head. I think it was a 275 or 277.5 squat, which was not too hard. His bench was, sorry if I get this wrong, like 160, 162, but many kilos spare because of just like soft elbows issue, which if you give yourself a whole year and as advanced lifter, you can probably clean that up by the next comp. And then his deadlift was, I think, 315 on the day. He's done 320 or 321 before in past competitions. And all of those, including the 315, was quite easy. So I think if he had a stellar day and were to push the limit on all three of his lifts and then execute well and follow the rules, it'll probably be somewhere in the ballpark of also 760, perhaps 770 plus. And then if I just examine myself, I've just hit 757. I would say not too hard, and it was quite good standards. If I've got still another block to go before the competition. If I add just sprinkle a few kilos across the board, end around 762, 765 in the gym, and keep the standard very high, and execute like I was talking about on squat and bench, like I think I'm good at, and then bring deads to the table, I think I'll also be in the ballpark of 760 to 770 plus. So perhaps snagging in that top three.
Yeah, so it sounds like that top five, top three, top four, top five is going to be like all 750 plus. And like if you don't total 750, you're just going to get eaten alive. One name you didn't mention there was Tom Glover from the Chads. What do you think of his lifting? I know at Nationals he put together a good total. Like he's in the 770 plus range. I think he's even done 780. I think if my memory serves me right, maybe
Yeah,
787.
787.
Like, and I don't personally follow him on social media, so I could be missing out on a lot. Maybe he doesn't post much even then, but he could be 800, for example. What's your thoughts on Tom Glover?
Yeah, Tom is very strong, and he did used to be stronger. So I actually used to coach Tom. He used to be a
Oh, okay, I didn't
110
know that.
kilo lifter. So the 787, yeah, the 787.5 kilo total pertains to that 110 class, which he had in March last year. Since then, he's decided to cut down into the hundreds.
Right.
I think the main thing in terms of that prediction of total and stuff is really down to the fact that he's dropped a weight class, and he's not a short guy. He's like over 6 foot. So when you are already moderately lean and pack out, or not fully pack out a weight class, but almost completely fill out a weight class, and then you drop down a whole weight class, and there's not too much fat mass to get rid of, your total will drop quite a lot. I don't think it's going to drop to the point where he's just out of the competition field altogether. He might even do quite well if I give him the benefit of the doubt and say 750 plus, perhaps even 760 is there. That could be very competitive as well for sure. The other thing is that he will be competing in the 100 kilo class for the first time, perhaps cutting. I'm not sure if he is or not, but also competing in day one against Tyson versus being in the primetime session. So I think the factors of dropping the weight class, not having actually competed in the hundreds yet, and potentially having to cut for a comp, which he hasn't done before, doing the day one session, are all things that could really shake up how that comp total could go. Yes, it could be very competitive, but it's not as locked in as the aforementioned three guys that I'm really kind of looking at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, that's such an important factor as well. Not only going down a class, but going down a class and competing in that class for the first time. You're still getting used to your leverages. You're still getting used to your I suppose technique changes, and also potentially, like you suggested, cutting weight might be a foreign concept. How your body's going to respond, like you said even earlier in this discussion about not putting that onus on other people. Unless you've done it before, it's the same thing with weight cutting. If you haven't done it before, you might not respond well. You haven't got that experience or know exactly what foods to eat, the timing, like all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I think Tom will do really well, but I'll be curious to see. It's just going to be such a stacked class. Look, this conversation has been awesome, and I've been super impressed with your insights. You're obviously very intelligent and very well thought out through all your coaching practice. Before I let you go, I want to get your prediction: 1, 2, 3. Who's winning? Who's coming second? Who's coming third in the team result overall?
So, in terms of the other teams, if I take Chronicle out, I think it will be between. Oh, sorry, I haven't even thought about this too much because I've just been thinking about the lifters themselves. But I think it will be top one will be between Lulift, Elemental, and Sim Strength. Top two will be maybe Sim Strength, all those three again plus Apex, and then that's two, and then top three. Far out. Yeah, I reckon those four somewhere in the mixture of top three. And if I were to add Crundall Crew, I would say we'll get into the top three, but I'll just leave it there.
That's a very diplomatic answer, man. It's just so hard to predict because you just really don't know where the cookies will land. And like I've said a couple of times already, all it takes is 1 or 2 mislifts from one lifter. Instead of finishing first, they finish third. They lose 3 points, and now you're on 17 points instead of 20 points, and you finish fourth instead of first. So that's, I think, the most exciting part is just like it could literally be anyone. I've had predictions of Novel Strength Culture taking the win. I've had people say Crundle Crew are one of the favorites. It's just like so hard to predict. So it's going to be a really fun day. Matt, I'm going to wish you the best of luck with the rest of your training, for your team. Hopefully you guys can come out and do a session at TSF over the next month or two. That'll be really fun on a Saturday.
That'll be fun.
Get a workout in and good luck, little team bonding session. And yeah, thanks again for your time. I know you're really busy. We're all really busy getting all our work done, and it's just the start of the year. But I appreciate you making the time. giving us all a bit of a preview and an insight into what it's like to be coaching at a Team Champs.
Thanks so much, JP.